people have this idea that just because you become a Christian, all your problems go away. They don't. But what you do have is you have a system to be able to recognize it for what it is and to be able to deal with it.
Right.
You know, um, you know, if you hear any of the big speakers, I've heard it over and over again from different speakers, you know, Les Brown, Jim Rohn, you know, there's a lot of different ones out there. They've all said it, and I've heard it over and over again. But, you know, when you're going through life, you're doing one of three things. You're either going into a problem, you're in the middle of a problem, or you're, you know, coming out of a problem. And most of the time you're in all, most of the time you're in all three phases at the same time.
Hello, this is Andrea from OurDayDream, back again with another awesome guest. This week we have Dr. Davis McAlister. He is a chiropractic physician, a strength and conditioning coach, an author, and public speaker. We speak about his extremely inspirational story where he goes from being a teenager, homeless, to enrolling in the military, to becoming the awesome man and father he is today. So without further ado, here is Davis. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Super excited. So you're a chiropractic physician, a strength conditioning coach, author, and a public speaker. But it seems like you're more so geared to like helping teenagers to see their value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I, you know, kind of put my energy into is, you know, especially with my coaching side. I work with, and you know, I'm also a powerlifting coach and still work with teenagers quite a bit. I was a teacher for about 12 years, and then have still continued to coach on the side when I decided to go back into full-time practice with my sports chiropractic. So continue to work and impact teenagers and you know, help build their confidence and all those things.
So whenever I was like reading into your like synopsis, and like, so whenever you were a teenager, you had kind of endured a bit, but anyway, can you tell us your story?
Yeah. Yeah, kind of going back, you know, my home situation wasn't real great growing up. I mean, I had you know, a decent relationship with my mom, but not so much my dad. I was a latchkey kid, so you know that kind of dates me a little bit on my age. But you know, you know, that was just the thing back then. You know, parents worked, and you let yourself into the house and kind of took care of yourself. And but there's always a side effect to that. And you know, there's a lot of people through my generation that ended up not having real great close relationships with their parents. And in particular where my dad was concerned. And so getting up into high school, it got a little worse. And finally it got to a point, it came to a head. Yeah, he basically, he told me to get out and put me out of the house, and then ended up, you know, out on the streets for quite a while. Was just trying to fend for myself and, you know, sleep where I could, eat what I could. And ended up managing to get in touch with an Army recruiter. An Army recruiter said, you know, hey, we'll put you in and give you a place to stay and food to eat and pay you and just do what we need you to do. And so that was my escape. And I did that for 8 years. So my primary job, I was an interrogator, linguist, had to learn different languages, and then did some cross training in counterintelligence while I was in. And you know, you learn quite a bit. You learn how to grow up pretty quick in the military. You know, you mature very, very quickly. And then after I got out of there, decided to get out and go back to school. Went to school at Mississippi State, you know, near where I grew up. You know, I grew up watching Mississippi State football, wanted to go back there, and went back and really didn't know what I wanted to do when I got out. I just, you know, knew that I needed to get my education. And because of my language background and a lot of my travels, I initially majored in international business, but when I got into it, I really hated the business classes. You know, so, but, and I ended up going to a chiropractor for the first time. My uncle took me to a chiropractor for the first time, and after that visit, that was like the best I'd ever felt. I didn't even know what a chiropractor was until I went to one the first time. But through everything that I did in the military, I was beat up pretty good, and then I ended up walking on and ended up playing 2 years of college football at Mississippi State. So was continuing abusing my body. So it was nice to be able to have that little piece to be able to put me back together, and then decided that that's what I wanted to do. It was instrumental in kind of getting me some direction and focus on where I wanted to go. And so I finished my bachelor's degree in 2.5 years there, and then moved to Dallas, went to chiropractic school, and have been in practice for 20 years. So during that time, found myself in a transition. My wife got very, very sick, and after we had been in practice for a few years, and found myself where I needed to be at home more. And so I kind of flipped my narrative. I hired another doctor, ended up selling my practice off, and would continue to do part-time practice, and then went to work in education, was offered a job to be a director for a health science technology program for a high school.
That's
And
awesome.
and so it allowed me to be able to be with my kids. The thing though is that when I ended up at home with my kids, I had a very, very stark slap of reality. I didn't know who my kids were. I didn't know anything about them. I didn't know what they liked. I didn't know what they liked to eat. I didn't know any of the nuances of them. And come to find out, they all had 5 very different personalities and likes and dislikes. And the reality for me is that I was failing as a parent, and because of that, and to a certain degree, I was repeating history. And in my mind, my dad ended up growing up in a household. He was treated the same way. He was kicked out of the house. He was didn't have a relationship, was cut off from his family, and he ultimately, whether he was conscious of it or not, did the exact same thing. And so it was turning
Right.
into a generational curse. And
Yeah.
so I said, I'm breaking that generational curse. We're not going to do that. We're not going to, repeat history. And so really kind of poured myself into spending more time with my kids, and the teaching opportunity it turned into a coaching opportunity, and was able to allow me to be able to spend more time with each one of my kids as they progressed up through high school. And I've coached every single one of them. I have one left at home. She's a sophomore in high school, and I coach the high school powerlifting team that she's on, and I'll continue to do that for the next couple of years. And once she graduates, I'll have to decide if I want to keep doing that or not. But my part of my vested interest is being able to get this to spend that time with her, but also continuing to work with kids and continue to help them, and not only just from a coaching standpoint, development, athletic standpoint, but also character development, leadership development. One of the first, we just started this week doing our tryouts and practices and getting started for powerlifting season. Our season starts in January and runs through middle of March. And we started kind of our preseason, so to speak, this month and this week, and sat down with all the seniors, and I tell them, look, you're the leaders of this team. I expect you to continue to teach and reinforce all the younger ones coming up. And leadership is not about entitlement. Leadership is about truly leading and mentoring and leaving a legacy for this team. And every one of these juniors, sophomores, and freshmen are going to remember every single one of you. How do you want them to remember you?
Right.
And so trying to really teach them skills that are going to pay off for them later on in life. And then during the course of all that, I had a lot of kids that would come and talk to me and ask me for advice and wanted some input, whether it was home situation or problems with other kids. Sometimes it was problems with other teachers. And I started kind of compiling a lot of these stories, started writing them down, because some of those questions, I was kind of floored, that I was asked a question to begin with, but just it made me stop and think, well, if these kids are asking these kind of questions, what kind of questions do my kids have?
Right.
At the time I had teenagers in high school, and so it allowed me to be able to sit down and have conversations with them, and I'm glad I did, because I started getting a really good grasp of some of the myths that float around in high school, and kids go to other kids for advice rather than people that actually know what's going on. So being able to work with them, and I continued to kind of log those stories for a couple of years, and then put everything on pause. And because out of that, I was starting to develop kind of a picture of what a lot of these kids were missing, especially in their home lives, and kind of nailed it down to 10 foundational things that were missing. And and when I sat down and started actually compiling this, and it started taking the form of a book, I started calling them pillars. The title of my book that I wrote is The Pillars of Powerful Parenting. And the reason I call them pillars is because they're foundational. And if you think about any of the ancient ruins that are still standing, the roofs have collapsed on them and everything else, but what's still there? The pillars are still there. And so these are the things that I feel like, and every family is different. The intent is not to funnel everybody into a single line of thinking as far as their family structure is concerned, but it just lays down some just foundational supporting type things that kind of help along the way. And we took the time to actually put all of these things into practice with our own family and trial them. And I will be the first to say, I have made more than my fair share of mistakes where my kids are concerned. And there's been things that I've had to go back and apologize for. But I want people to be able to learn from that. I want people to be able to hopefully not repeat those lessons. I even teach my own kids. I teach the kids that I coach. There's two ways to learn things. There's the easy way and the hard way. The hard way is to go through and make the mistake yourself. The easy way is to learn from somebody else that's already made it, listen, and apply it. And,
Right.
and I know adults that still insist on learning things the hard way. So it's
So true.
But
I had gotten upset with my daughter. Like, it was pretty much like a week before she was getting ready to graduate. And she's like, I don't know why you're acting so erratic. And I'm like, just chalk this up as something that you're not going to do to your kid. Like, act erratic.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because that's actually one of the things that I cover in there, is that, probably one of the most difficult times and trying times between a parent and a teenager is usually that second half of that senior year of high school.
Yeah.
And it's because they're seeing the light, and the law says that they're either 18 or they're about to turn 18, and they're adult, and in their mind they're ready for the world and they already know everything they need to do. And you're looking at them and you're like, oh my Lord, I know that I didn't prepare you for everything. And you start,
Yeah. It's like you
conjuring.
have this little bit of time left. I'm
Yeah.
like, I only have 18 years to teach you everything you need to learn. Can you just let me do that? And then
Yeah.
whenever you turn 18, I can be your friend then.
Yeah. 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 And we sat down and we've taught to every one of our kids that, look, as you get older, I mean, yes, you're an adult. It still doesn't erase the fact that I'm your parent, but
Yeah.
my role changes. I become more of an advisor. I'm here to help guide you
Right.
still to provide answers, but to a certain degree, you get to make your own decisions, but you also get to live with whatever decisions that you make.
Right.
And and I've always tried to teach my kids and the kids that I coach. I've tried to tell them, if you're always going to make mistakes, mistakes are going to happen, but try to keep your mistakes small. Don't make them life changing. And
I like that. That's good.
yeah, and so even with being in Texas, we go and hunt, and we shoot and everything else, and and I relate it back to a basic principle that I'd teach them when I would teach them how to shoot, is aim small, miss small. It's the same thing when you live your life, regarding mistakes. Aim small, miss small. Keep those small things, and don't make a decision that's going to permanently change the course of your life.
Right.
And so So that's kind of in about a year, a little over a year ago, I had kind of a clear message to go ahead and finish the book. And so I did. I sat down and actually wrote the rest of the book within about a week to a week and a half. And so had to get a little bit of help, with the publishing side of it, and managed to finally get it published. And it's, got it out on Amazon. And then since then, we've taken it and developed it into, I've got a study guide now that's going with it. And, I do have people that are already contacting me and about, sitting down and setting up sessions to be able to tell them from my standpoint, hey, this is what I've seen. This is how, I've seen it dealt with, and I've already been able to help some folks along the way. So it's been really good.
Right. So like that changing point where it was like, oh wow, like you had that grand awareness that you were kind of following like that line of like the generational curse. At that point, you almost probably, in order to shift your children's way of thinking about you, did you have to like come clean about how like maybe I might not have been doing things the way I wanted to, but now I want to do things a little bit different. I just feel like a lot of parents are trying to be like authoritative, or somebody to look up to and things like that. But I feel like a lot of parents aren't really transparent with like, these are the things that I went through. Like, this is the things that I'm going through right now, and this is where I actually want to be.
Yeah. I mean, my children have all been pretty aware of, my family situation. Fast forward a little bit from my teenage years, I tried to mend fences with my parents along the way while I was in the military and even through undergrad. And then my wife and I met when I was going through and get my doctorate degree. And she had two boys from previous marriage, but as far as I'm concerned, they're mine. They even both took my name when they turned 18, voluntarily of their own, volition. And because of the impact that they felt like I had in their life, their dad was not around. And so, but we ran into an issue where, my parents were wanting to treat, the biological children different than, the non-biological. We don't even use the word step in our house. There's no stepdad. There's no, stepchildren. We don't use those terms in our house. And so, and I know that not every blended family, operates that way, especially if, the other parent is still involved. Everybody has to kind of work with what's going to be best for them, but, that's what worked best for us. And, my parents wanted to treat the biological versus the non-biological differently. And we had to just put our foot down and said, no, that's not happening. We're going to treat them the same. You need to treat them the same. And, they opted to break ties with us. So, and that was a hard process at the same time, because, you go through a process of, man, what could I have done better there? Is there something else I could have done to not let it go that way? I had repeatedly tried to call, and I would just get hung up on. And even when our youngest was born, I tried to call, like we hadn't spoken. And at that point, we had not spoken in 2 years, and called just to say, hey, you've got another grandchild on the way. And all I got was thanks, and hung up. And so we didn't speak again until, let's see, about 8 years. Yeah, it had been about 8 years. My mother passed away suddenly. I found out through about sixth, seventh hand that she had passed away. Nobody had called me to let me know. And it was a fluke that anybody else in our family found out about it. Because, for whatever reason, my dad did not want anybody else involved in it, and, wanted to cut everybody out. So, the last conversation that he and I had was that, was over that. And, I confronted him about it, and his last words to me were, "I never want to hear from you again." So that's all that I can do. But my kids were witness to that, you know,
Yeah.
and you know, the entire time our kids have been growing up, we've always looked for teachable moments. We want them to be able to learn from the lessons that are going on around them. Let them be able to see what's happening, but also have an understanding of what's happening, and to a certain degree, sometimes how to process it, what to take away from it, and how to apply it to their own life.
That's
And
awesome.
and one of the things that I've told them, I said, I don't want that to be us, with all of our children. And I've read this not too long ago. I can't remember where I read it, but it was something that was posted, and it said at a certain point there will be a conversation that is had that will determine the course of the relationship with your children for the rest of their lives. And that is very true. And a lot of times it may be a confrontational type thing, and you've got to learn, and you've got to stop and think about how to handle that confrontation, because it could result in severing that tie, and I don't want that for any of my children. Even
Yeah.
though I may not necessarily agree with all their decisions, and there's times that they know that I haven't agreed with their decisions, but we still talk, and we still, it hasn't affected the relationship. And
Yeah.
it's about what you allow to. So, and then what I hope is that, and there's times that, they've made those decisions, and I've looked at them and said, okay, now I want you to remember, when you have your kids, I hope you're okay with them making that same decision, you know,
Yeah.
but that at least makes them stop and pause and, think a little bit. So, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I just because I would be completely transparent with like a lot of things that I have went through, mostly with my daughter, because she was just like, she loved talking to me. So
hmm
I would like give her all this information. She'd be like, I'd be telling my friends all about, these conversations that we have, because they would have no idea, mom, like, because they don't talk to their parents about stuff like that.
yeah,
But I think it is. It's like whenever you said, you know, don't just go out there and just make mistakes, but learn from other people's mistakes and
hmm
learn from your own. And
yeah,
so I think that's that, giving your kids that super wisdom so that whenever they do leave your
hmm
home, like they not only know, wisdom from your behalf, but then also they're learning wisdom on their behalf. And but yeah, and I think even like me, whenever I was a teenager, like being a little girl, like you're not really taught too much how to be a man of the house, or,
yeah,
move out on your own as a girl. And so, you know, I know in my case, I had to find a man to move out. Like, and
mhm,
so, and I see that a lot in society, is that women need to have a man to take care of them, or they don't, you know what I mean?
yeah,
So, but I think that's an important thing, to be like transparent with your kids.
yeah. We've had lots of opportunities. Their friends have provided plenty of opportunities for teaching material, to for teachable moments, and helping them understand. And we always relate it back, because we've been very diligent about making sure that they understand why certain rules are in place that we have. And we tell them, for every rule that's ever been created, there's a reason why that rule was created. I mean, from my standpoint and our belief system, I mean, we started off with 10 commandments, and then it's continued to multiply from there, because, people are just going to continue to push the limits. And then,
Yeah.
somebody's going to have to, make a rule saying, okay, you can't do that anymore.
Right.
Uh, and then, some of the rules that we've had in our house were ones that came out of, things that I observed out of my own experience teaching and watching teenagers, and some of the mistakes that they made. And so a lot of them were life-changing mistakes, and I didn't want that for my kids. And so it ended up being some rules that our kids may not have always necessarily agreed with at the time, but now that they've gotten older, they've fully appreciated why the rule was in place and why we enforced it. So,
Right.
yeah.
And we have, like, right now, like you said about how when you were younger, you would, like, you pretty much let yourself in the house and things like that. And like in today's society, a lot of kids are, in a single parent household. It's like my older kids, they pretty much had to parent my youngest son while I was at work, and sometimes have to make dinner. And,
Yeah.
and that's what's really difficult too. It's because they were there parenting one another, and then, my youngest son, and then I walk in like 3 hours after, like, got home from school, and I'm trying to be, tell them, well, like, you need to do this or you need to do that, and they're like looking at you like, who the heck are you?
Yeah.
Like, uh, we just been here all by ourselves. Like, we didn't need you to do that. Like, we were just here all by ourselves,
Yeah.
taking care of all this. You're gonna walk in and tell me to do this, that, and the other.
Hmm.
It's very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. And that's the thing too. I mean, we've always raised our kids to be independent, and even our daughters. I've told them, I want you to be able to figure out who you are in the context of who you are, not
Yeah,
in the context of somebody else, or you trying to please somebody else, or
yeah,
trying to fit in with somebody else. You figure out who you are based off of what you like, and your
yeah,
direction that you're going to go. And we've had to teach those little things along the way. We have all these little sayings that we do that we've taught our kids and had them repeat back to us. And one of them is that not everybody deserves a seat at your table. And we've had to go through some of those lessons of, just because they're nice to you and just because they want to talk to you doesn't necessarily mean that they're a friend to you. And
right.
and
Or people have seasons.
hmm yep.
Sometimes
Yeah.
they're in your life for a little bit of time.
Yeah, yeah. We've taught them that too. I mean, it's a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Some people come into your life for a very specific reason. They're very quickly gone. Season is a little bit longer, and then their roads deviate in a different direction, and then you have those very, very few that are those lifetime type friends from whatever time
Yeah,
they merge onto your highway. And so, um, and where our daughters are concerned, I've always taught them, I want you to get married because you want to be married. I want you to get married, to somebody because that's what you want to do, not because you think you have to do it. And
yeah,
you know, because at the end of the day, who's responsible for you? You,
right.
and you need to be able to take care of yourself. And I want them to be able to practice that and be able to be able to exercise that before they lock themselves down into a
Yeah,
relationship that plus it also gives them the time to we've had the same conversations with our boys too. It's not just our girls. We've had these same conversations with our boys. We want them to be independent, try to raise our children not to be codependent.
right.
That you think you have to have somebody. You don't have to have somebody. You have somebody in your life because you want them to be there. And so um and when you raise your kids that way, especially growing up, we've always been very real with them. We've had very adult conversations with them,
Yeah,
along the way.
that's a good thing.
You know and
Yeah,
it's funny because we've taught our children, you stand up for yourself. And there's times that they've had to stand up for themselves where a teacher was concerned, and there's times that we've been called in, and I've had to sit there across from a teacher and say, okay, let's stop and assess this for a second. I said, I would tell you the exact same thing, but if I'm telling it to you, you're looking at it as an adult, but because my child said the exact same thing that I would say, now it's being disrespectful. I don't think so.
yeah,
You know,
right.
you know, so
Yeah. So your book is Christian, like, has a Christian foundation to it.
mhm,
I don't know. I just think that the world needs more Jesus.
Mhm. Agree. I agree. Yeah.
It's yeah, it's like our area has like 2% goes to church. That was a couple years ago, the statistics. And we're like a pretty calm neighborhood. Like
Yeah.
it's a decent size. It's not like a lot of crime here or anything like that. And it's still like low numbers. And I couldn't even imagine like other areas. And it's just I don't know. I was an atheist for 17 years, and the way that I parented them then, as opposed to becoming a believer again,
Mhm.
it's just different.
Yep. Yep. I had, somewhat similar experience. I had, because the house that I grew up in, my dad was a pastor. And so that was but I grew up in a real small rural church. And, I did have fond memories of things like, we would eat lunch together on after church. They had a big room with these big banquet tables, and everybody would bring food, and everybody would have lunch afterwards and everything else. But then as I got older and in high school, and the conflicts that I kept having with my dad, and all these things that kept manifesting themselves, it kind of soured me, you know,
Yeah,
because that's supposed to be the example when I'm supposed to be that. Well, I don't want to be that.
right.
And for a long time, I turned my back on the church. Um, and it was through a series of things that happened when I was in the military that I was turned back. Sometimes you find yourself in situations that you don't realize how strong you are until being strong is all you have left. You basically lose everything. And found myself sitting in a chapel talking to a chaplain, an army chaplain one time. And that was kind of the start of turning the ship, so to speak, to getting me back to my foundational things, and getting a little bit more of a spirit and Christian based lifestyle, and belief system in place. And then when I did that, though, I saw the course of my life start to change, and
Yeah,
and things started getting better. And you know people have this idea that just because you become a Christian, all your problems go away. They don't. But what you do have is you have a system to be able to recognize it for what it is and to be able to deal with it. Um,
right.
you know,
Yeah,
um, if you hear any of the big speaker, I've heard it over and over again from different speakers. Les Brown, Jim Rohn. There's a lot of different ones out there. They've all said it, and I've heard it over and over again. But when you're going through life, you're doing one of three things. You're either going into a problem, you're in the middle of a problem, or you're coming out of a problem. And most of
that's
the time, you're in
heartbreaking.
all. Yeah, you're most of the time you're in all three phases at the same time.
Oh,
And but life is all about problems. And this is one of the things that I teach the kids when I talk to them. Say, look, I said, because they're starting to wade into those waters. They're trying to learn how to deal with problems. And and especially with high school girls, everything's drama filled, and everything is blown
yeah,
up, and
yeah,
everything is a big deal. And trying to teach them not everything is a big deal.
yeah.
Most of the time they're most of your problems are not big deals. It's about how you handle it and respond to it. And I tell them, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you keep going through the same experience over and over again, and you ask yourself, why does this keep happening to me? I tell them the answer is real simple. It's because you haven't learned your lesson that you were supposed to learn the first time that it happened, or the
Yeah.
second time that it happened.
Taking personal responsibility is extremely important to
Yes.
growing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so I tell them, you're going to continue to go around that block
Mm,
until you finally learn your lesson. Then you get to go to the next block. And then eventually what happens is when you learn enough lessons and go around enough blocks, you kind of lay a foundation of who you are. And then you're going to have experiences where you're going to pull from experience where these things are concerned, and then you're going to have to use these to be able to deal with these problems. And eventually you're going to continue to build these walls, and then eventually you end up with, a tower, or, you know, I refer to it as a temple. This is how God builds his temple within us,
Yeah,
is by going through all these lessons and learning
that's
the
good.
things that we're supposed to be here to learn and
Yeah, that's
continue to
really good.
grow.
Yeah, that's really good. And it's true too, because, you know, every time that, bad things happen, you just seem to get a little bit wiser and a little bit stronger.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been like, because I've been noticing more with my eyesight is like depression in people. But I also suffered with depression for
Hmm.
a lot of years in my life before finding God. Um, and it's this, I think holding yourself as a structure connected to what's happening in your life. And so it's like, you know, instead of these things are happening to me, it's like this is a part of who I am.
Yeah.
And if it's bad stuff, and I kind of like to tell people it's like that's an opportunity then to learn something different, because if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep seeing the same results. So
Yep.
like that it's like whenever I'm going through hardships, I'm like, that's a signal to me that says you need to like be opening your mind up to like seeking out more knowledge,
Mhm.
learning something new, doing things like that. And I think that's like a huge thing in pulling people out of this is who I am, these
Mhm.
things that I'm going through. But kids do that so young.
Yeah.
Like I see I seen it like as a progression. Is like Jackson, my youngest son, he was 5, and he'd go outside and pee in the yard, and he didn't care who was looking, And now he's like 9, and he's like, I'm stressed out. I'm like, why are you stressed out? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, stop being stressed out. He's like, I can't. And I'm like, yes, you can. I'm like, you just gotta look someplace else. But it's like it's almost like it's a natural progression that we start attaching how we feel to who we are. Like
Mhm.
I am stressed,
Yeah.
and these things. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And the biggest thing I think too with that is communication.
Yeah.
I mean, being able to communicate, and uh, my wife will be the first one to if she recognizes that I'm grouchy, or I'm just kind of staring off into space, and she'll be the first one to say, all right, what's going through your head, what's going on, you know
Yeah.
and
Right
wanting to
up.
talk it out and talk it through, and also just trying to teach our kids to do the same thing. Don't just
Yeah.
react and just assume somebody's being a jerk. There's a reason why somebody does things
Right.
and reacts to things. Take the time to figure out what it is. um, there's a phrase that we learned, that we started teaching our kids a long time ago, was that seek first to understand. If you seek first to understand, most of the time you'll resolve most of the conflicts before they even start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. It is so true. So we can find your study guide. You sell your study guide with your book on Amazon. Does it like show up right there with your book?
I believe
Um,
it does. It's actually been a little while since I've done an actual search on it myself, but you can find both of them on Amazon. And then with people, if they decide that they would like to go through one of my coaching sessions, then I usually give them, send them the book for free. So,
yeah.
yeah. And then
How do they find how do they find you for the coaching sessions?
I have a website. It's drdavismcallister.com. A lot of people are finding me through doing, podcasts and, guest appearances. I've been on the radio a couple times, and here in the area, had started kind of developing a little bit of a face for my chiropractic side. I work in a high profile clinic, right next to the Dallas Cowboys headquarters. And so I've been on TV quite a bit, and so that's kind of developed a little bit of recognition, and um, people have found me through that, and then some of the organizations that I'm with, but through a lot of podcast speaking type things on Facebook, finding people on that, and then I've had people reach out directly to me through Facebook. Uh, to request some time to be able to sit down and maybe get some pointers, or decide that they want to go through a full coaching session. I have a 10-week program that involves the study guide along with the book, and we go through each week, each one of the chapters, and break everything down each week through that program. And then I've got some that, people just want to spend an hour with me and bounce some things off of me. So I make time for that as well.
So like you do coaching parents too as well on how to parent their children, to like give them foundational things that they need for their life.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And all I'm doing is following the things that I established, put together in the book that, kind of guides them through that process, but, allow them, especially along with the study guide we go through, and there's some practices and exercises in there that put a lot of those things into practice to allow them to be able to stop and think and look at their family structure and some of the relationship aspects within their family with their teenagers, and be able to work through some of those issues. And it prompts people to be very, very real with who they are, allows for some honesty and some truth to come out. Because even though we're parents, we're, like I said, we're still prone to mistakes, and
Yeah.
sometimes those mistakes are hard to hear.
Yeah.
And so it kind of allows for them to be able to kind of air some things out, and whether it's just the parent that wants to meet with me, and or the parent and the teen together, be able to meet with me and just kind of talk them through some of the things that they're going through, and just share with them the stuff that I've seen either through my own experience, or I've seen through working with teenagers and their home situations, and being an educator, and trying to help make things better.
Yeah. And then you have the military background too. So do you bring that, the structures that you got in that to the people too? Because I mean, I think that, being a disciplined self really is something that makes it like make your day easier, make you more prosperous in so many ways.
Yeah. It's funny because I've actually been on some podcasts and radio shows that really had nothing to do with parenting, but some people had gotten my book and read it, and they were like, they didn't even have kids, but it made them stop and think about their business side, because this is stuff that you can apply to, your everyday, everyday things that you do as far as work, or, if you're self-employed, things that kind of give you some structures to be able to live by. I mean, we talk about consistency, we talk about communication, um, planning, how do you structure your day? And then I give some other tips along the way. I mean, some things that are really good that I tell people to do is, at the end of your ending of your day is just as important as your beginning. A lot of people focus on their beginning. I get up early, get my workout in, listen to something motivational, or read my Bible, or something along those lines, and then they just kind of go into their day. And I tell people, because this is one of the things that I implemented a number of years ago, was, at night I sit down, instead of sitting there playing on my phone, or, those types of things, I take the time to sit down and I look at my schedule for the next day, and I plan out a to-do list of my day, and I structure
That's
my day,
great.
and so if you do that, you look at your tasks that you have, and you reprioritize, and of course, as you get into your day, sometimes things happen, and you got to kind of, but you have a basic format. You can go back and look at a basic outline for your day and say, okay, I may have to shuffle this around, or, well, this is now going to go into tomorrow's to-do list, because now this has come up and taken priority, but you have something to be able to follow. You're
Yeah.
not just,
Living in chaos.
living in chaos and living a reactionary type life instead of a proactive type life.
Yeah. I've been trying to work on that for years, that like structuring myself. It's definitely a necessity, but also too, if you're really not intentional about your day, the days can run into one another so easily. And, next thing you know, like 30 days feels like 5.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
it's just like it's never ending.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for joining me, and I'll be sharing the links out and stuff like that too. And I appreciate you. I think your story is extremely inspirational. There's a lot of people that dealt with childhood trauma and stuff like that, and they don't always end up going down that path of like, I want a better life for myself than what it feels like I'm in right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things I could have very easily gone a different direction.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
and that's kind of what the things that I look back on is that there was times that even when I had kind of turned my back on God, God was still watching out for me.
Yeah,
Because I felt like he knew the direction I was going to go. And, um, there were things that I walked away from that I probably should have never walked away from. And, you know, and so I'm very thankful. And that's probably, if there's one thing that I can leave with people, is every day, contemplate your gratitude. Make sure that you're grateful for what you do have. A lot of times we get so focused on the things we don't have. You're never going to have enough money. You're never going to have enough time. There's always a way to be able to, kind of reflect and contemplate on what you don't have, rather than just taking the time first to be appreciative for what you do have.
right. I love that. Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much again, and God bless. And
And thank you. You too.
I'll be reaching out soon.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you.
All right, bye.
All right. Bye.
If you like this message, please hit subscribe, because we have an awesome guest coming up every week, and I don't want you to miss out. God bless. Have an awesome week. I'll see you next time. Bye.